Welcome back to our ValueByte series. We are here to talk with John. John, we're very excited to chat with you today about how owners can prepare to sell or transition their business. But before we jump into the good stuff, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you help businesses and business owners.
Oh man, at the risk of boring everybody, I'll be brief because I don't want this to be about me, but I do feel it's important to know who you're talking to, who you're dealing with. I'm one of half a dozen partners in WealthPoint Business Advisory Services, and all of us are ex-serial entrepreneurs who have started and built and passed on businesses, most of us several times, and we now have this laser focus on helping other business owners get exit right after trading a huge chunk of their lives to build this business, this asset. So that's what we do. And all we do is succession and exit planning and execution, all the way through to fruition for our clients. We don't manage money or sell anything, just fee-based help to owners to clarify and achieve their desired outcomes, both with this asset and for the asset, because many of them care about the legacy of that business after they decide they want to move on. Personally, I'm an electrical and computer engineer by schooling, and I've started and built several related electronics companies and sold them to Rockwell and to Westinghouse and then some smaller businesses as well. But the real genesis of what we do was our managing partner, Tim Young, who through his ownership journey, buying out a family-owned business, then building it and then selling it to Fuji, and not having been served very well through that journey, 15 years ago, he decided he knew how he would have wanted to be served around that part of the ownership journey. And so he founded WealthPoint Business Advisory Services to create a process and tools and provide that service to successful entrepreneurs. So we are all just a bunch of lovers of the free enterprise system in America. But the double edge of that sword is that you can work your butt off for decades and get a fraction of what you've earned and what you deserve and what you need out of that asset if you don't get exit right. So that's basically who we are and what drives us every day.
So I know there's probably some owners that are listening and thinking, well, this is not for me because I'm not even thinking about selling yet, right? I'm so heads down in the day-to-day, like that is so far off in the future that I don't even need to stick around for this. So what would you say to those owners to keep them listening to this conversation, even if exiting their business doesn't feel like a priority to them right now?
That is such an excellent question, Heather, because I mean, think about it. It seems so logical that after devoting this huge piece of yourself in your life to building this asset, that owners would make sure they get exit and monetizing the asset right. But you and I both know that the stats are tragically different than that. And the middle and lower middle market, 70 to 83% of third-party sales never close. And the ones that do close at very low average multiples of EBITDA compared to businesses that were prepared properly. I mean, really think about that. How can that be? I mean, we're talking about really smart, really successful, self-made people who typically have, 80% of their entire net worth tied up in this one asset? How can they get it so wrong in the end? It just doesn't make sense. So I've contemplated that a ton. And for me, it's all about education, or more precisely, a lack of education about what it takes to get it right. It's about getting clarity of your desired outcomes. It's about understanding all of your options to pass on your business. It's about understanding the transferable value of your business and preparing the asset for a full value transition, which typically takes years, not weeks and months. And the fact is that owners are, like you said, so busy running their business that they almost never take the time to educate themselves now about these things. And so they end up kicking the can down the road and end up suffering the consequences of that lack of education, which is basically compromised outcomes, fewer options, compromised outcomes. And that's what's responsible for the rotten statistics around why these smart, highly capable people can get something so important so wrong. And so, it's worth a little deeper dive on that. And in the last 15 years and 200 plus family groups, owner groups we've served to craft and execute succession and exit, we see mainly a focus on money when they contemplate exit. And understandably, right? They got 80% of their net worth tied up in this asset. But for most successful entrepreneurs, the impacts on people's lives who will remain with the business and the impacts on the legacy of the business itself are also important to them. And these things get missed quite a bit or misunderstood in how they'll play into really in owners' decision-making when it comes time to figure out what do I do with this asset. And the industry really, we've talked about it, promotes this kind of thinking of just selling it at the end of your ownership journey. And so owners get this notion that selling the business just means a third-party sale. But there are many other ways to monetize your business, and owners really need to understand them before they make any decisions. All of the options have pros and cons, and relative to net pennies in the pocket after tax from the transition, relative to impact on stakeholders' lives who will influence their decision-making, relative to impact on the legacy of the business itself. And so it's just a perfect storm out there of business owners, like you mentioned, just being so busy with operations day to day. And this exit thing being later at the end, right? That's later. Why would I spend a bunch of time on it now when I'm so busy? And then not knowing what they don't know about all their options and the time and things required to prep the asset so they have all their options available and to deal with those things. So at some point in the future, that asset is prepared and they do have all their options available, and then they can execute in the best interest of those outcomes and know they're going to get full value for the asset. But that education just isn't out there. Even advisors don't realize how many options owners have to pass on their businesses, and they suffer from that same lack of education. For example, the bankers and CPAs and attorneys, they typically will lose that business owner relationship when the business sells to a third party. Not good. But that's typically not the outcome when they choose another option. They'll maintain the relationship. And they don't even understand those things. So the whole industry would benefit from a little education a lot sooner in this whole business ownership journey from our perspective.
That's such great insight and really just gives such a snapshot of the challenges and really the necessity of education, like you said. And I'm sure, John, you've seen owners who haven't taken the time to prepare, or maybe those owners that were just caught by an emergent situation in their life. You're going to exit your business at some point, one way or the other, right? And so those business owners maybe that exited in a way that they weren't planning for, an undesirable way. Is there a story or an example of that type of owner or incident that really comes to mind that can inspire you and make you want to continue to help owners avoid that scenario?
Oh man, where to start? So many stories. I can tell you a quick story of my own. When we sold to Westinghouse, the outcomes for our employees were not what we had negotiated, and we were no longer in control of the company, and couldn't do anything about it except enter into a long-term lawsuit we didn't have the money to fund, and they knew it. That was just rotten. We didn't see it coming, and a lot of those outcomes around third-party sales happen that way. And I think that's a big part of the statistic why so many don't close, because a lot of those things come to their realization through due diligence and negotiation, and they get to a place where they just go, geez, I just can't do it, And so And many follow through just because they have some triggering event. I mean, there's a really tragic stat that 60% of transitions don't happen by choice. That's really sad, because then they're just kind of stuck with what they get after all the work. So, there are so many other options that have so much more potential to achieve an owner's monetization outcomes, to achieve the outcomes they want for their people and for their business, where you do have that control to create those outcomes as part of the process, right? I mean, an ESOP is a classic example. This strategy, I mean, it's been around since 1974. It's amazingly powerful to accomplish such a wide variety of monetizing outcomes, people outcomes, legacy outcomes for the business, and yet it's so obscure. I mean, only 6,500 ESOPs in the country. 65 to 7,500.
You're going to have to tell people what the acronym is, because most people, I think, listening aren't going to know what an ESOP is.
Sorry. It's an ERISA plan, like a 401k, except it's called an employee stock ownership plan. And the main difference, well, there are many, many, many differences, but the difference is that the only asset in the plan is stock from that company. So many privately held companies do them, not many on an absolute scale, but most of those 6,500 to 7,500 ESOPs are private businesses. I mean, there are some public ones. Publix grocery stores, huge grocery store chain. They're employee owned. But anyway, ESOPs are just a powerful strategy that most owners don't understand very well. And if they Google it, they'll end up more confused than before they Googled it, because they're so complex and there's so much out there that they'll have more questions asked. They'll have more questions at the end than they had answered to begin with. So, but we had one client, for example, who, they had a 10-year runway, and these guys were planners. So, we got looking at their what they wanted for their people. Their people were extremely important to them. That was the main focus of their business, was to develop their people into the best human beings they could be, personally and professionally. And so they had this 10-year runway, and then they knew so little about ESOPs. For example, they didn't realize that you could monetize 100% of your equity and not lose any control over running the business. And they also didn't know they could do that, monetize 100%, and get a huge bite of the apple down the road through various levers you can pull in the ESOP, warrants and other things. And they sure didn't understand the enormous impact it would have on all their people to start that plan 8 years sooner. And so that 10-year runway turned into 2 years. And these were really smart people who were amazing business people with a business about to go global. And, they were so focused on building this asset, they didn't know what they didn't know about these other options, including the ESOP and others. And once they got educated, it was like, holy mackerel. I think my ideas and the way I'm going to start running my business are going to change pretty much right away, based on what they now knew they wanted to do to pass their business on down the road. So, that's a case in point where owners just simply don't know what they don't know about true succession and exit planning. And it costs them dearly in the end. So again, education now is the answer to maximizing outcomes, whether those outcomes are contemplated for a year or 2 or 3 down the road, or 5 or 10. Because once you really understand what it takes to prep the asset, which is typically measured in years, not months and weeks, like owners often think, once you understand all those options and the things you need to do to have them all available to you, and to take the transferable value of your business from whatever it is to you and make it fully transferable, those are significant issues. And really, if you just go down the road, kick the can down the road because you never get comfortable, it's not a good thing. So yeah, that's our mission, right?
I love that you talked about the values that this business had of really taking care of their employees and developing their people, and that aligns so well with our process. We use our vision value model as the first step with any of our engagements, because we're kind of different than other marketing agencies. We have to know what that long-term vision is so that we can make sure that we're keeping people on track to that. And we're not derailing their vision by putting together a strategy that doesn't align with it. And you've got both pieces of the pie there, right? You're talking to people about not only their vision, where are you going, but what do you value most about your business? What is the thing that you want to protect the most in this transition? And gosh, I wish that other exit folks talked like that, because you're the first one that I've really heard talk about those values in that way that really aligns with the way that we think about those values too. But what are some ways that you help owners identify that vision and their values and connect with those things instead of just focusing on that day-to-day survival? How do you kind of get them heads up and thinking about the future instead of worrying about all the little things that are keeping them distracted?
You're just full of good questions, Heather. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and honestly, that part of what you guys do is so aligned with what we do. It's, and I guess when you get it right, that happens a lot, right? But owners, we see many times that owners have this vision for their business, right? And they work super hard to make that vision come true. But what they really need to do is to back off the business one layer and ask that same question about what's the vision for my life, and how does this asset need to perform financially and otherwise for life to come out the way I want it to. If owners did that, it might not be so easy for them to just have this assumed number on their personal financial statement for the value of their business and think it's just going to automatically come true down the road when they're ready to move on. As we know, that rarely happens. So, business owners are constantly evaluating risks to their business and working to mitigate those risks, but somehow they don't look similarly at the risks to their life coming out the way they want it to, and how dependent that is on this one huge, non-liquid, extremely risky asset called their business. So we see often owners just assuming they'll be able to sell it for what that number is they've put on their financial planning. But you and I know that that's truly a rare occasion. So our process is to first work with owners to help them, get clarity on things. Our process is to work with owners to work with their stakeholders so owners can get clarity on the outcomes they want for themselves, financially and otherwise, to get clarity on the outcomes they want for those people attached to their business who will influence their succession and exit decision-making, and to get real clarity about what they want for the business itself, for the legacy of that thing they've built. Those outcomes should drive everything around succession and exit planning. They drive everything we do for our clients. They're the smell test that everything gets bounced across against. And so they also need to understand the ability of their business to support those outcomes. It's the asset that has to throw the party for all that stuff. So if they don't really understand where is this asset right now relative to supporting all these things that are important to me, kind of shooting in the dark, right? So they need to understand that asset thoroughly in terms of a current valuation and its ability relative to those outcomes to make them come true or not, right? Maybe those outcomes have to do with their family and they want a career path for family who are at lower levels in the business, or and on and on. Outcomes can vary greatly, and so many are not about money, right? And so they need to understand those things. They also need to understand all their options. Then they can make good decisions about not only operating the business, but about owning the business as a financial asset and getting that asset to perform in the greater scope of their lives the way they just assume it will, want it to, need it to. So those are the big things to really, we call it, our mantra is know your story, right? That's their story right there. What are those outcomes? Where's the asset? What are the tools in the box over here that will allow me to apply them to this asset to achieve these outcomes? That's their story. Once they know that story, they can wake up tomorrow saying, okay, where do I need to go from here to get there at some point in the future?
A common theme of our conversation has really been going back to the education and just the lack that so many business owners have when they're planning for their exit. And one of the things you just said was they need to know their options. And so when owners are thinking about selling their business, thinking about that exit plan, or maybe this is the first time they're even thinking about it. That may be the case for a lot of folks. We've talked briefly about an ESOP, and outside of that and outside of listing their business for sale, what are some ways that owners can transition their business that maybe they've not thought about, or even that they don't know about at all?
What another good question that is. Well, in addition to the obvious third-party sale, right, there are about 7 other strategies or so. I mean, going public, and there are some other ones besides the ones that are typically used by privately held businesses that don't have that go public strategy built into their business plan. But and then there are combinations of them. But there's an owner investor model where you don't necessarily monetize the business all at one time, but maybe you just want out of operations. You can't manage those millennials or whatever the root cause is, right?
Hey, we're not so bad.
I'm just as an example. No, but so there are a lot of times when they don't mind the income from the business, but they want to take some chips off the table. They want to get out of operations, but they're comfortable with the future performance of the asset. And so that owner investor model where they basically own it, but don't run it themselves anymore, just become a chairman of the board or whatever, and shuffle to the mailbox in their bedroom slippers once a month and pick up those checks. Sometimes that owner investor model checks a lot of boxes for owners, like guys like me who are boomers, who are going to die in the chair or whatever, but they want a little different role for themselves. Generational transfers, obviously, those are very challenging with the worst statistics of all, but the most rewarding when you get them right. There are recapitalizations. There are ESOPs, as we talked about, many versions of ESOPs. There are leveraged and unleveraged internal transitions, 301 redemptions, strategic wind downs, and then there are hybrids of multiple of those things. Sometimes the solution isn't just one. It might be a minority ESOP to give employees a benefit and some skin in the game, combined with a 301 redemption to the leadership team to keep them around for the long term, and so forth. Sometimes it's surrounding a monetization with a stock appreciation rights plan to put some glue in the seat for key people who need to stick around to ensure the future success of the business. Because another big aspect of true succession planning that owners don't really get most of the time, because they're so dang busy and everything, is that it doesn't matter whether it's a third-party sale or any of these other options we just talked about. All of those require the future success of the business, or those outcomes won't happen, at least not fully, right? Even in a third-party sale, you're not getting all your money at transaction. There will be holdbacks, clawbacks, reps, warrants, and if that business doesn't perform the way you've advertised, you're not getting all your money. So, but certainly for a generational transfer, the business needs to be successful after key people, founders, owners, whomever, want to leave with all their tribal knowledge, with all their skills, with all their strategic visionary talents or management skills, or maybe they're the keeper of the culture to attract and retain talent, or maybe they have key relationships in the business with key clients or vendors or whomever. All of those things, leadership, management, ownership, culture, and relationships, they all need to go with the business, not with people who want to leave, to build some longevity into that business through that stress of key people wanting to move on in life. And so, there are so many strategies and so many scenarios, because owners are all different. Their mindsets are different. The assets are different. The people and what they want for their business are different. There are no cookie cutter solutions in this game. You really just have to know the game and dive in and figure stuff out and get it right. And when you're running a business, I mean, life these days is complex enough. And then you own a business and run a business as part of it, and that complexity goes through the roof. And along with that complexity is just a ton of uncertainty about how to get it all right. And so, unfortunately, in the industry, it's really difficult to get true collaboration out of your team of advisors as a business owner. You might have an estate planning attorney, a business attorney, a CPA, other consultants, a wealth manager, a banker. And, to get those guys to all collaborate to create a proper succession plan and execute it doesn't happen. Right. I mean, a lot of it is people stuff, Randy. And it's not just putting operational improvements in the business or financial improvements and scorecards and metrics and things like that in the business. Those are kind of table stakes in the consulting world these days for privately held business, right? But the biggest asset in any business is its people. And the people either make it go or make it not go. They either make it awesome, or many times they hold it back because of the relational issues between owners and leaders and managers or whomever. And those relationships are important. And if you leave those off the list when you're crafting a true succession plan, you're missing the boat in a lot of ways. But yet think about it. What attorney or CPA or wealth manager or banker has a business model to get paid to work on relational issues that are fundamental to the future success of a business? They don't have the business model to get paid for it. They probably don't have the skill set, and they probably don't have the desire. So it's really hard to put a team together to help you piecemeal. It's just hard, right? And therefore these people are busy, and therefore it doesn't happen very often, like almost never. So as you know, that's what happened to us. We tried hard and we got it wrong, us partners at WealthPoint. And it was like, okay, we're not idiots. How'd that happen? And so that's what got Tim to say, this is crazy. Somebody needs to come up with a better way. So
I think it's so exciting, honestly, to hear about how many different options there are, and really just to hear also about the fact that there's not one right fit just across the board, right? And so for those owners that maybe feel like they're not sure how it fits or even how to go about it, I feel like you've really just highlighted the need and the true gap for someone like you that has that exit planning experience and knowledge, the good, the bad, and the ugly from your own personal experience, to come in and help identify what the right plan is. And knowing that there's so many options outside of just that third party seller coming in and helping you get that done. I think that's exciting for owners because you can find something that is the right fit for you and that takes care of your people if that is what you value most, or whatever aspect of your business it is that you value most, you're able to come alongside them. And so that's good news. That's exciting.
well, we sure enjoy what we do for our clients. It's very important to us to create the most value and impact with this body of knowledge we've built up over the last 15 years working at this with a laser focus. And anyway, it's extremely rewarding because typically these impacts we have on these owners' lives and their families is life-changing often. So pretty darn cool.
Yeah, definitely. So, John, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your experience. It's always just such a pleasure to talk with you. I always learn something new every time that we talk. So for business owners or maybe advisors that are thinking, this guy needs to start helping me with my clients, where can people connect with you to learn more about how y'all work over there at WealthPoint and how you can help business owners and advisors alike?
Yeah, for me, I try to funnel everything through my email these days, right? There are just so many nodes of communication these days. I try to simplify it as much as I can and get everything to go through my inbox because it makes it easier. So just JOHNC, John C at wealthpoint.net. WealthPoint, no gaps, no dash, just John C at wealthpoint.net. Or they can always call you and say, who was that dude on your podcast?
Yes.
How do I get in touch with him?
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today, John. It was a pleasure.
likewise, I really appreciate the opportunity to just get the word out there, right? I mean, it all starts first and foremost with educating yourself today about what it takes to get what I expect and need out of this asset I've built. So anybody I can help get more aware of that, you let me know.
Awesome. You know, we will.
All
Thanks.
right.
Thanks,
I
John.
appreciate it very much.